The cabin looked ordinary in daylight, even welcoming with its slanted roof and weathered wood that smelled faintly of pine sap. But I swear to you, within hours of stepping inside, something in my gut twisted, warning me that I wasn't supposed to be here. I should have turned around right then. I should have listened to that small, insistent whisper at the back of my mind telling me to leave. Instead, I set my bags down, ran a hand across the rough wooden counter, and told myself I just needed rest. The Airbnb listing had promised quiet solitude, fresh mountain air, and a rustic escape from the chaos of the city. That was exactly what I wanted. Silence. I had burned out from long nights at the office, from endless noise and light. I thought I needed nothing more than a weekend in the woods, far from anyone. But solitude in the woods is not what it seems. Silence here is not gentle, it is suffocating. The longer you sit with it, the more you realize it is not empty at all. It was late afternoon when I decided to walk the trail behind the cabin. A narrow dirt path wound between tall evergreens, the air sharp with resin and damp soil. I breathed deep, trying to shake off the unease that clung to me since arriving. And then I saw them. 2 men. They were just standing there, not moving, not speaking. About 50 feet down the trail, side by side, heads bowed slightly as if studying the ground. Their stillness froze me where I stood. The forest was silent around us, so silent I could hear my own pulse thundering in my ears. Hey, I called, voice cracking. Neither lifted their head. I waited, hugging myself against the sudden chill that had settled over the trees. My rational mind tried to explain it. Maybe they were hunters. Maybe they dropped something. But deep inside, I knew something was wrong. Slowly, I turned back toward the cabin, telling myself not to look back, not to give them my fear. By the time I stepped onto the porch, I couldn't stop myself. I glanced back. The trail was empty. My stomach flipped. I tried to shake it off, tried to convince myself I was tired, paranoid. After a quick dinner of instant noodles, I sat on the porch with a beer, watching the sky turn black and the trees sink into shadow. The forest became a wall of darkness. The trail swallowed whole. That's when I heard it. A sound, deep and guttural, rolling through the night, like a growl. Too low to be an animal I knew, too deliberate to be wind. My heart climbed into my throat, and I froze with the bottle halfway to my lips. I stayed outside too long, listening. When I finally forced myself in, I locked the door, double-checked the windows, and told myself I was being ridiculous. But when the floor creaked under my feet, when the cabin's old wood groaned in the wind, I couldn't shake the feeling that the sound had been meant for me. And then footsteps. Outside. Slow. Deliberate. Crunching on leaves. Coming closer. I held my breath, my hand frozen on the light switch. The steps stopped right outside the cabin. Knock. 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 My chest seized so tight I thought I'd pass out. I crept to the window, peeling back the curtain by an inch. They were there. The 2 men from the trail. Only now, their faces were hidden behind masked grotesque animal heads. One a snarling wolf, the other a twisted stag. Moonlight glinted off something in the wolf's hand. A knife. The stag raised his fist and slammed it against the door, rattling the old hinges. The wolf dragged the knife across the wood, the blade screeching. I stumbled back, fumbling for my phone. My voice shook as I whispered into it. Please. You have to send someone. There are men outside 2 Monterey trying to get in. The dispatcher's calm voice felt unreal, like it was coming from another world. Stay on the line, sir. Officers are on their way. Do not engage. Do not engage. As if I could. The banging grew louder, more furious. The door shook with each blow. My whole body trembled, sweat running cold down my back. And then, just as suddenly as it had, beg unit stopped. Silence. I stayed there for what felt like hours. Phone clutched to my ear, too afraid to breathe. When the police finally arrived, the men were gone. The woods swallowed them whole again, leaving no trace but one thing: a knife, buried deep into the cabin door, its handle still quivering. Even now, months later, I wake to that sound in the dark, the muffled knock, the blade dragging against wood. The cops never found them. No footprints, no evidence. Just 2 men who shouldn't exist, who only seemed to live in the forest shadows. But I know what I saw. I know they were real. And sometimes, when the night is very quiet, I still feel like they're watching me. I didn't sleep that night, even after the police left, after they promised to patrol the area. My body refused to rest. I lay on the couch with every light on, the knife still wedged in the door like a mocking reminder. My phone sat in my palm, screen glowing, 911 ready to dial again. But the silence pressed harder than the men ever had. It wasn't the calm of night. It was the waiting kind, the kind that hides things. Every creak of the wood made me jump. Every gust of wind through the trees outside sounded like footsteps circling the cabin. Around for a... I must have dozed. When I woke, sunlight spilled through the windows, warm and forgiving, as though the night had been only a dream. Almost. The knife was still there. I stared at it for a long time before forcing myself to yank it out. The wood split slightly where the blade had lodged. I set it on the counter, not sure if I should keep it as proof or throw it into the woods. The metal was cold and stained with something dark, sap. Maybe. Or rust. I didn't want to look closer. I told myself I would leave. Right then. I would pack, get in the car, and drive back to the city. But something kept me. I don't know why. Pride. Stubbornness. The need to prove to myself that I wasn't just some coward running from shadows. Maybe it was exhaustion, the kind that turns your thoughts to mud. By noon, I convinced myself it was nothing. Prank. Locals messing with the outsider who dared rent a cabin through an app instead of going through the town. People wore masks. They scared me. They ran off when the police came. That was it. Still, couldn't relax. My eyes kept darting to the window, waiting for shapes to appear between the trees. That afternoon, I went walking again. I don't know why. I guess I thought if I confronted the trail in daylight, I'd take some of its power back. The sun cut through the pines in golden shards, and the forest looked ordinary again. Safe. Even. But the deeper I walked, the more wrong it felt. Birds didn't sing. No insects buzzed. The only sound was my own breath and the crunch of leaves underfoot. And then, ahead of me, they stood again. 2 men. Same place as before. This time, though, their heads were lifted, and they were staring right at me. I froze. My throat tightened so hard I couldn't swallow. Their masks caught the sunlight, Dull plastic gleaming the wolf. The stag. My stomach flipped, remembering the scrape of the knife against my door. They didn't move. I took a step back. They didn't follow. Another step. Still nothing. I turned and walked quickly, my chest seizing with every breath, convinced that if I ran, they'd run too. When I finally burst back into the cabin, I locked the door and leaned against it, shaking so hard my teeth rattled. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't some stupid local joke. They were hunting me. That night, I sat in the cabin with all the curtains drawn, every lamp on, the knife from the door clutched tight in my hand. The police wouldn't come back unless I had evidence of immediate threat. That's what the dispatcher said when I called again. Evidence. As if the knife in the door wasn't enough. As if the two figures on the trail weren't enough. Hours dragged like chains. Midnight came. The woods groaned in the wind. And then footsteps again. Crunch. Crunch. I bit down on my tongue to keep from screaming. They circled this time. I could hear them pacing slowly around the cabin. Boots pressing leaves and twigs. A shadow passed the window, tall and misshapen. I dropped lower, crouching beneath the sill, my heart battering against my ribs. The doorknob rattled. I clenched the knife. The wolf mask peered in through the window, pressed against the glass. I swear it grinned at me. I stumbled back, dropping the knife. My chest felt like it was collapsing. I scrambled for my phone, but when I lifted it, the screen was black. Dead. No. No, no, no. I had charged it that morning. I knew I had. The glass tapped. Once. Twice. Slow. Deliberate. I bolted into the bedroom, slammed the door, shoved a chair against the handle. My lungs wheezed as I crouched in the dark, hugging myself, rocking like a child. Outside, wood splintered, a groan of nails tearing free. They were prying at the door. Please, I whispered, though no one could hear. Please, stop. And then nothing. Silence. Minutes crawled into hours. I must have passed out again, because the next thing I knew, dawn light was bleeding through the curtains. The house was intact. The windows unbroken. The door still locked. But in the dirt just outside the porch, 2 sets of footprints. Circling. Circling. Like wolves around prey. I tried to leave that morning. I packed my bag, threw everything into the car, turned the key. Click. Nothing. I tried again. The engine sputtered, choked, then died. The tank was full. The battery had been fine yesterday. I lifted the hood, staring at the tangle of metal like it could somehow explain itself. I don't know much about cars, but I knew enough to see what was wrong. The wires had been cut, snipped clean. Someone had been under the hood while I slept. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. They weren't just scaring me. They were trapping me. That evening, I sat on the porch with the knife across my lap, staring into the woods. My body felt hollow, as if the forest had drained everything out of me. I thought about hiking out, about walking the 5 miles of dirt road that led to the highway. But every time I pictured the trail, I saw them waiting there, unmoving, masks tilted toward me. The sun sank. Darkness bled up from the ground like ink in water. I braced myself for the footsteps, for the knock, for the sound of steel scraping wood. But none of that came. Instead, somewhere deep in the trees, I heard voices. Low, murmuring, not quite words. And then laughter. High, cracked, broken. It echoed through the forest, carried on the wind. Not close, not far. Every hair on my body stood on end. I closed the door, locked it, and whispered to myself over and over, "Morning will come. Morning will come." But the night stretched long, and the laughter did not stop. By the third day, I no longer trusted the cabin. The walls felt thinner, the windows weaker. I could hear everything in the woods, branches snapping, rocks shifting, the soft crunch of leaves like something crawling closer. The smell of damp earth seeped inside, clinging to my skin. I stopped eating, stopped drinking. My body was too tight with fear. At one point, I thought I saw someone in the trees. Not the wolf, not the stag. A third figure. Smaller. The mask looked like a bird-sharp beak. Hollow eyes. It vanished when I blinked. Was I imagining them now? Was my mind making them multiply? I pressed my hands to my face and told myself I was still sane. But the cabin whispered otherwise. That night, I woke to a sound worse than footsteps. Breathing. Inside. Slow. Ragged. Too close. I sat up, heart screaming, eyes darting to the bedroom door. The chair was still braced against the handle. And yet he heard it. In the room with me. I held my breath, every muscle trembling. For a moment, the dark thickened, pressing in from all sides. And then, it stopped. Silence again. But the smell lingered. A sour, animal stink that did not belong to me. I stayed awake until dawn, knife in my hand, whispering to myself that I was not alone. Because I wasn't. Not anymore. I stayed awake until dawn, knife in my hand, whispering to myself that I was not alone. Because I wasn't. Not anymore. When the pale light finally touched the windows, I stumbled out of bed, shaking, every muscle weak from hours of waiting for something that never came. My body felt like a stranger's, stiff and trembling, but I forced myself to search the cabin. Every corner, every closet, under the bed, behind the curtains. Empty. But the smell was still there. Musky. Sour. Like wet fur and sweat ground into old wood. I pressed my sleeve to my nose, gagging. The cabin felt infected, tainted by something I couldn't see. And then I saw it. The window in the kitchen. The lock had been undone. Not broken undone. I staggered backward, while burning my throat. Someone had been inside. Last night. While I slept. The footprints outside. The laughter in the woods. The circling they weren't trying to break in. They already had. I didn't remember opening that window. I knew I hadn't. Which meant I wasn't safe anywhere. I spent the morning in a haze, checking my phone every few minutes even though it was still dead. No signal. No battery. No hope. The silence pressed in. Thicker now. Heavier. I couldn't even hear wind in the trees. And then movement. At the edge of the forest. Through the narrow slits of light between the trunks. I saw them. 3 of them this time. The wolf. The stag. The bird. Standing still. Watching. I shut the curtain. my hands trembling so hard I almost ripped the fabric. My breath hitched, shallow and panicked, my lungs refusing to pull enough air. Why me? Why this cabin? Why this forest? Had they been waiting all along for anyone foolish enough to come alone? Or was it me they wanted? By noon, I was pacing. My nerves were so frayed I couldn't sit still. I walked the cabin end to end, tracing the walls, listening for sounds that didn't belong. That's when I found it, carved into the wood above the bedroom door. 3 shapes: a wolf, a stag, a bird, scratched deep into the frame, like claw marks. I staggered back, my stomach hollow. They had been here before me. Maybe long before me. Maybe always. The thought dropped like a stone into my chest. This wasn't an Airbnb. Not really. This cabin wasn't meant for guests. It was meant for prey. The sun dipped again. The forest turned black. I sat at the table with the knife on the wood before me, staring at the door, waiting. I told myself I'd be ready, that if they came to fight, that I wouldn't let myself be cornered like an animal. But when the sound came slow, dragging steps across the porch, every ounce of courage bled from me. The doorknob rattled once, twice, and then a voice. Low, rough, open. My chest clenched. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Open. A second voice. Higher. Cracked. Please. Open. It didn't sound human. It sounded wrong, like words forced through broken mouths. I shook my head, whispering, No. 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 The third voice came from the window, right against the glass. Open. I screamed, stumbled back, crashed against the chair. My knife clattered to the floor. Shadows slid across the windows, dark shapes pressing close. The glass bowed under weight. And then, laughter. All 3 at once. High, jagged, echoing inside the cabin walls until it felt like the house itself was laughing at me. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears, begging for it to stop. When I looked again, they were gone. But the laughter stayed, burned into the wood, vibrating in my bones. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I sat curled in the corner of the room until dawn painted the trees gray again. When I finally dared to step outside, the air was sharp, biting, heavy with the scent of pine and rot. The forest seemed smaller, pressing closer around the cabin, the trees leaning inward like they were listening. And there, on the door, carved into the wood above the place where the knife had lodged, one word. Welcome. I staggered backward, clutching my chest, while rising so fast I almost collapsed. They weren't chasing me away. They were inviting me in. And suddenly I knew this was only the beginning. The word carved into the door haunted me more than the laughter, more than the masks, more than the knife. Welcome. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. The grooves in the wood were deep, gouged in long strokes as though someone had pressed with inhuman force. I reached out once, fingertips brushing the raw edges, and jerked my hand back like the wood itself had burned me. I knew then that the cabin wasn't neutral ground anymore. It wasn't a shelter. It belonged to them. I was only a guest in their game. I tried to leave. Again. The dirt road stretched away from the cabin like a promise. I stuffed food into a backpack, grabbed the knife, and forced my legs to move. The woods loomed tall and endless, the air damp and heavy with the rot of fallen leaves. At first it was quiet, just the crunch of my boots and the quick rhythm of my breath. Then I heard them. Not behind me. Ahead. Voices drifting between the trees. Low murmurs. Laughter breaking high and sharp, cutting through the air. I froze, listening. The words weren't clear, but they were closer. Moving closer. I turned back toward the cabin. My chest was heaving, my body screaming at me to keep running. But I couldn't. They were everywhere. The forest wasn't mine. It was theirs. Back inside. I shoved the dresser against the door, dragged the couch across the window, barricading myself in like a rat in a trap. My breaths came ragged, my vision swimming. I thought of calling for help again, but the phone still refused to turn on. When I pressed the power button, the screen flickered faintly just for an instant, and I swear I saw something. Not the startup logo. A face. A mask. The wolf, grinning at me through digital static. I dropped the phone, my hands shaking so badly I nearly sliced myself on the knife. That night, they came back. I knew it before I heard them. The air shifted. The silence grew too thick. Then steps. Slow. Heavy. Purposeful. The porch groaned under weight. A knock. Soft. Gentle. As though a neighbor had stopped by to say hello. And then a whisper. Right against the wood. "We know you're awake." I pressed myself against the wall, knife tight in my hand, eyes burning with terror. My chest ached with the effort not to sob out loud. They circled again. I could hear them moving, one at the window, one at the back door, one on the roof. The roof. My stomach dropped. Dust drifted from the rafters as weight shifted overhead. The boards creaked, complaining under the press of feet. I tilted my head back slowly, heart slamming against my ribs, staring at the ceiling as if I could see through it. A shadow passed over the skylight. A beak. The bird. I scrambled back, choking on my own breath, nearly tripping over the barricade at the door. My body begged me to run, but there was nowhere left to go. The roof groaned. A scratching noise, metal against wood. Claws dragging. Then silence. Too sudden. Too complete. I stood frozen for what felt like hours. When I finally dared to look outside, they were gone. But the knife I had kept clutched so tight was missing. I didn't remember dropping it. I didn't remember letting it go. It was just gone. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard them. The laughter, the voices, the tap, tap, tap at the window. I began talking to myself, whispering just to fill the silence. My own voice sounded strange, cracked, unfamiliar. I told myself stories to stay sane. Stories about the city, about my friends, about the office and the noise and the light. But each time I drifted, each time my voice faltered, another would answer. Not from me. From the dark. Repeating my words back to me in broken echoes. Like a child mocking. Until I screamed at the walls to shut up. On the fourth night, they stopped knocking. They didn't have to. I woke to find the dresser moved. The couch shoved aside. The door was wide open. I staggered forward, heart in my throat, staring at the gaping dark where the porch should be. Cold air poured inside, The smell of damp earth and sweat choked me. The footprints in the dirt were fresh. Dozens of them. Wolf, stag, bird circling, pacing, leading away into the forest. They hadn't needed to break in. They had come and gone as they pleased. And I had slept through it. I didn't know what they had taken. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. My sanity felt thinner by the hour, fraying like paper in fire. The next day, I tried again to walk the road. I thought if I left at dawn, I could make it out before they noticed. But as soon as I stepped off the porch, I saw them, all three, standing in the middle of the dirt road, masks tilted toward me, not moving. I took one step forward. They didn't shift. Another. The wolf lifted its hand. Something glinted. My knife. My own knife. I froze. My blood turned to ice. And then, all three of them moved at once. Not toward me, backward. Slowly. Step by step. Luring me. Drawing me into the woods. I ran. Back into the cabin. Slamming the door. Sobbing until I couldn't breathe. They didn't follow. They didn't need to. They had shown me the truth. There was no leaving. Not by the road. Not through the woods. The only way out was whatever end they had planned. By the fifth night, I stopped fighting sleep. I let it take me, because waking life was no better. And in dreams, I saw them clearly. I stood in the woods, bare feet sinking into moss, the trees bending close overhead. The wolf, the stag, and the bird circled me slowly. Their masks gleamed in moonlight, but beneath them there was no flesh. Only hollow blackness, eyes like pits, mouths full of static. Stay. They whispered together, voices overlapping, broken. Stay. I woke screaming, clawing at the floorboards, my nails tearing until blood smeared the wood. The window rattled with laughter. And outside, carved into the dirt with the tip of my missing knife, mine. Morning came again, and with it, despair so heavy it hollowed me out. I was too weak to think, too drained to plan. I wandered the cabin aimlessly, every corner humming with their presence. I opened the fridge, not hungry, just desperate for distraction. Inside, there was no food, just three masks. The wolf, the stag, the bird, waiting for me. The masks in the fridge were the breaking point. I slammed the door shut, stumbled backward, hands trembling so badly I nearly tripped. My chest convulsed, gasping for breath. My mind screamed impossible, but my body knew better. They had been inside. Again. The thought gnawed through me. If they could come and go as they pleased, why hadn't they killed me already? What were they waiting for? I barricaded myself in the bedroom, dragging furniture across the floor until the door was blocked. I curled in the corner with my arms wrapped around my knees. Outside, the woods moaned. Hours passed. Or maybe only minutes, I couldn't tell anymore. Time had unraveled. Then footsteps. Not outside. Inside. The boards creaked, soft and steady, like someone walking the length of the cabin. I pressed a hand over my mouth, suffocating on my own shallow breaths. My pulse thundered against my palm. The steps paused. Right outside my door. I bit down so hard I tasted blood. Slowly, the knob turned. The barricade held. The door rattled once. twice, and then a laugh low, broken, vibrating through the wood. They weren't trying to get in. They were reminding me they could. Sometime later, I don't know when, I woke sprawled on the floor. My throat was raw, my body limp. I must have fainted. The door stood wide open. The barricade was gone. I staggered to my feet, dizzy, disoriented. Every shadow in the cabin felt alive, shifting, breathing. I grabbed a splintered chair leg as a weapon, clutching it tight. Why? I croaked into the empty room. What do you want? Silence. Then, from outside, stay. I dropped the chair leg, my whole body convulsing. The voice wasn't theirs. It was mine. My voice echoed back at me, warped, thrown from the woods like a cruel trick. By the seventh night, I no longer recognized myself. My reflection in the bathroom mirror startled me as bloodshot, cheeks hollow, lips cracked and bleeding. I whispered to the glass, testing my voice. Stay. And for an instant, the reflection didn't move with me. Its lips lingered, still forming the word after I'd already stopped. I shattered the mirror with my fist, blood dripping down my knuckles. The shards clattered into the sink like tiny silver knives. The forest grew louder. At first it was footsteps, then voices, then laughter. But by now, it was a constant carousel, 1,000 whispers threading through the trees, rising and falling like a tide. Covered my ears, but it didn't stop. The sound was inside me. The cabin itself shook with it, boards groaning, glass rattling in the frames. And then came the pounding. Not a knock, not a polite request, a battering. The door shuddered, cracked. The walls trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. I screamed until my throat tore, bracing myself against the door with all my weight. But it wasn't them breaking in. It was me breaking down. At some point, the pounding stopped. I opened my eyes to silence, my body shaking so hard I could barely stand. I forced myself to the window, parting the curtain with trembling fingers. They stood at the tree line. Dozens now. Not just the wolf, the stag, and the bird. Others. Masks I didn't recognize: boar, fox, bear. A whole menagerie. All staring. All still. My knees buckled. I slid to the floor, clutching myself, sobbing into the hollow of my arms. The forest had birthed an army, and I was their prey. I don't know how I survived that night. At dawn, the figures were gone, though their footprints covered every inch of dirt around the cabin. Spirals, circles, strange patterns carved into the earth. Symbols I didn't understand. I knew then I wouldn't last much longer. My body was wasting, my mind unraveling. The cabin had become a tomb, and they were the gravediggers waiting for me to finally collapse. That evening, when the sky burned orange through the trees, I made a choice. If they wanted me to stay, I would go. I grabbed the pack, shoved open the door, and stepped into the forest. The air was thick, heavy with rot. Shadows stretched long between the trees, swallowing the trail in black veins. I walked. For hours. Maybe. My legs moved without thought, carrying me deeper and deeper until the cabin was long gone. And then, in a clearing, I found them. All of them. A ring of masks in the dusk. Their shapes too tall, too thin. Bodies wrong in ways I couldn't describe. They shifted, swayed, tilting their heads in unison as I stumbled forward. The wolf stepped closer, raising my stolen knife. The stag raised its hands, palms empty, open. The bird tilted its beak to the sky, releasing a shriek that split the night. I dropped to my knees, my voice breaking. "What do you want from me?" They didn't answer. They only closed the circle, masks glinting in the dying light, pressing closer, closer. The last thing I remember is the knife gleaming, lifted high, and then darkness. I woke up in a hospital bed. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Machines beeped softly. My wrists were bandaged, my body weak. A nurse leaned over me, her eyes wide with pity. "You're lucky," she said softly. "They found you wandering the highway. You were dehydrated, raving. But you're safe now." Safe. The word meant nothing, because when I turned my head, I saw them, in the corner of the room. Masks. Wolf. Stag. Bird. Waiting. Always waiting. I never went back to the city. I never reclaimed my life. I exist now in half-light. Every shadow a threat. Every creak of floorboards a warning. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear the word carved into the door. Welcome. Not as invitation, as verdict. Because I know the truth now. The cabin wasn't theirs. It's mine. And I will never leave.